Jurgen's gaze fell upon the chest carried by the captain of the Dark Soul unit. Within it lay Jaehwan's Stone of Fallen Souls, a sacred and dangerous artifact that should never have left the vaults of the castle. His chest tightened as Manhwa's sharp words pierced the tense silence. The future of Gorgon hangs by a thread, Prime Minister. And yet, you saw fit to hide this stone? Manhwa's tone was accusatory, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous intensity. Did you honestly think withholding it would help? Jurgen gritted his teeth but held his silence. Manhwa stepped closer, his voice lowering but no less venomous. Do you understand what's at stake if the castle lord fully turns into an undead? Have you ever thought about the devastation a giant undead could wreak? He sneered, his words dripping with malice. You've seen the destruction caused by a single medium-sized undead. Entire armies crumble before them, cities turn to ashes. Now imagine that multiplied 100-fold, a living calamity enslaving the souls of the dead and spreading endless ruin. Is that what you want for Gorgon? Jurgen clenched his fists so tightly his knuckles turned white. He couldn't deny the truth in Manhwa's warning. The castle lord's rampage was proof enough of the threat, and with Dr. Chang Hyo still absent, the situation had spiraled beyond control. But creating an undead seal? That was a drastic step, and Jurgen knew the consequences all too well. Even with the Stone of Fallen Souls, only someone from the Nak clan has the skill to craft an undead seal, Jurgen countered. You know as well as I do that it's too late to summon anyone qualified from the clan. Manhwa's lips curled into a sly grin. Oh, don't worry about that, he said smugly. With a wave of his hand, figures emerged from the shadows behind the captain of the Dark Soul unit. Jurgen's eyes narrowed as the figures stepped into the light. They were draped head to toe in tattered, ceremonial wrappings, their faces obscured. A foreboding aura surrounded them, a testament to their unnatural presence. These individuals, Manhwa announced with pride, have mastered the art of creating an undead seal. No, they're not from the Nak clan, but their skills will suffice. Jurgen's stomach churned as he studied the mysterious figures. There was something deeply unsettling about them, something inherently wrong. Do you even understand what you're proposing? Jurgen snapped, his voice filled with fury. If you go through with this, all of the castle lord's mana will be drained into the stone. Do you have any idea what kind of devastation that could cause? Manhwa's expression darkened. I know exactly what I'm doing. Sacrifices must be made for the greater good, Prime Minister. You've had your chance, and now it's my turn to act. Jurgen's heart pounded as he realized the depths of Manhwa's resolve. He wasn't just attempting to save Gorgon, he was prepared to gamble everything, even the castle lord's life and mana, in a bid to wrest control of the situation. In the chaotic hierarchy of Gorgon, no hereditary system ensured the continuation of power. Jurgen Cheever understood the devastating implications of the current situation. If someone claimed the Stone of Fallen Souls infused with the castle lord's mana, they could inherit his immense power and seize control of Gorgon. The thought chilled him, what if this power fell into the wrong hands? As the strange, bandaged figures extracted the Stones of Fallen Souls from the ornate box, preparing to initiate the formation of the undead seal, Jurgen's unease deepened. Handling such stones was perilous, a feat only the Nak clan, or rare exceptions like Jaehwan, could manage without succumbing to contamination. Jurgen's mind flashed back to a conversation with the castle lord, who once mentioned a peculiar group capable of wielding such power without adverse effects. Could these people be the ones his lord had spoken of? The timeline of events suddenly struck him with clarity. Over the past 6 months, the castle lord had spiraled from initial spirit contamination to bouts of uncontrollable rage. Had this all been orchestrated? Suspicion turned to certainty as Jurgen's eyes fixed on Manhwa. Was the outer castle minister the architect of this scheme, plotting to seize the castle lord's power all along? Jurgen spun around and barked an order to his men. Arrest Manhwa, he commanded, his voice echoing in the chamber. But his heart sank as he noticed the stony expressions on their faces. Not a single soldier moved to obey. Their silence spoke volumes. His men were no longer his allies, they had sided with Manhwa. Realizing his isolation, Jurgen fell to his knees in despair. The betrayal cut deep. He had been blind to the collusion within his ranks, and now, Gorgon teetered on the edge of disaster. Manhwa, his confidence unwavering, smirked as he directed the cloaked figures. Begin the process. We don't have time to waste, the castle lord is moments away from fully turning. The mysterious figures circled the castle lord, their movements deliberate and ritualistic as they began crafting the undead seal. A haunting energy filled the air, and Jurgen's chest tightened with guilt. He looked at the lord, whose form trembled under the weight of the transformation. This was his failure, a consequence of his complacency and trust misplaced. I'm sorry, my lord, Jurgen whispered, his voice barely audible amid the ominous chanting. I failed you. I failed Gorgon. Helpless, he could only watch as the ritual unfolded, fearing the dawn of a new, darker era. Tears streamed down Jürgen Cheever's face as he knelt, his voice trembling with apologies to the castle lord. The weight of his failure crushed him, leaving him powerless to prevent the unfolding disaster. Suddenly, a deafening crash shattered the heavy atmosphere. The basement ceiling caved in, debris raining down amid a cloud of dust. The ground trembled under the force of the impact, and chaos erupted as everyone scrambled for cover. As the dust settled, wary eyes darted toward the gaping hole in the ceiling. Confusion rippled through the room as figures struggled to make sense of the attack. Jürgen wiped his tear-streaked face and glanced upward, his sorrow replaced with astonishment. There, standing amidst the rubble, was Jae-hwan. Mai-han, his composure momentarily shaken, narrowed his eyes at the intruder. "Who dares to storm the fortress so brazenly?" he demanded, his voice laced with anger and incredulity. "Do you even know where you are?" Before Jae-hwan could respond, Captain Jahir stepped forward, his fury directed at Mai-han. "Enough of your charade." Jahir snarled, his tone sharp and unyielding. He gestured to the battered man he had dragged along. "This one has already confessed everything, your betrayal, your lies, and how you've manipulated and harmed the castle lord." The revelation hung in the air like a storm cloud. Mai-han's eyes burned with anger as he turned toward his accomplice, who stammered a plea for forgiveness. Without hesitation, Mai-han silenced him permanently, striking him down in cold blood. Gasps erupted around the room as the lifeless body hit the floor. "You dare kill him in front of us?" Jahir bellowed, his voice filled with both outrage and disbelief. "What is the meaning of this madness?" Mai-han smirked, his expression twisted with mockery. "Suicide," he declared with feigned innocence. "Poor fool couldn't live with his guilt after being exposed. You can hardly blame me for not stopping him." Jahir's hands clenched into fists as his temper flared. "Enough of your lies," he shouted, rallying the others. "This is betrayal of the highest order. Don't fall for his manipulations, we must stop him before he completes the undead seal. If we don't, he'll control the castle lord's power and doom Gorgon." But even as Jahir tried to inspire resistance, a chilling sight stopped him cold. The soldiers, his own comrades, turned their weapons toward him. Their eyes were devoid of reason, their movements eerily synchronized. Jahir's heart sank as realization struck him like a hammer. "What's wrong with all of you?" he whispered, disbelief mingled with despair. The truth dawned like a nightmare. Mai-han's treachery ran deeper than anyone had imagined. His influence had poisoned not just the leadership but the very defenders of Gorgon. Jahir's grip on his sword tightened as he prepared for the battle of his life, knowing the odds were against him. The soldiers lowered their heads slightly, their voices a chilling monotone as they addressed Captain Jahir. "Forgive us, Captain," one of them muttered. "But we cannot let you oppose Minister Mai-han and the Golden Sky Clan. The castle lord's seal must be completed, and you do well to remain silent until it's done." Jahir's fury burned hotter than ever as he faced the betrayal head-on. "You spineless cowards," he roared, his hand tightening around his weapon. "You dare stab your own comrades in the back? Have you no shame?" Jae-hwan, who had been quietly observing the chaos, let out a low, sardonic chuckle. "So this is the mighty Gorgon," he mused aloud, his voice laced with mockery. "I was promised your protection in exchange for saving your castle lord, but tell me, how is a city full of traitors supposed to protect anyone? This hardly seems like a fair deal." Prime Minister Jürgen Cheever's head snapped up, his heart pounding with unease. "What are you saying?" he asked, his voice trembling. For a moment, it felt as though the fragile hope they had been clinging to was slipping through their fingers. Jae-hwan turned his piercing gaze toward him, a wry smile playing on his lips. "I'm renegotiating the terms," he declared, his tone cold and resolute. "I'll save your castle lord and deal with every last traitor here." He paused for emphasis, letting his words sink in before continuing, "But in return, I want something. I want Dr. Qinghyo. And more importantly, I want Gorgon's full support in launching another Abyss expedition." The room fell into stunned silence. The Prime Minister's face turned pale as fear gripped him, his mind racing at the implications of Jae-hwan's demand. For Jürgen, this man's conditions threatened not just the castle lord but Gorgon's fragile stability. The traitors exchanged nervous glances, their confidence visibly shaken by Jae-hwan's audacious proposal. Even the captain of the Dark Soul Unit, a figure known for his composure, faltered at the sheer boldness of the proclamation. Their shock deepened as the realization hit, this man wasn't bluffing. Minister Mai-han's eyes narrowed as he studied Jae-hwan. His mind raced to piece together the fragments of rumors he had heard about the enigmatic warrior. He had dismissed the stories of a man who single-handedly killed Janaya, even after the latter had turned into an undead, as mere exaggerations. But now, watching Jae-hwan's confident demeanor and the ripple of fear spreading through the room, Mai-han began to reconsider. So you're the one who killed Janaya, Maihan said, his tone sharp with suspicion. I didn't believe it at first, but judging by your actions and the terror you've instilled in my men, perhaps the rumors are true after all. Jaehwan raised an eyebrow but said nothing, his silence only adding to the tension. Maihan's expression hardened. No matter who you are or what you've done, I cannot allow you to interfere. If you think you can stop us, then you'll have to fight with everything you've got. His declaration echoed through the chamber, signaling the inevitable clash. The traitors readied their weapons, their initial doubts now replaced with grim determination. Jaehwan, however, stood unfazed, his eyes gleaming with the confidence of someone who had faced far worse. The air grew heavy with anticipation, the basement teetering on the brink of an explosive battle. The protagonist gripped his sword tightly as Minister Maihan gave a sharp signal. In an instant, the conspirators charged at him from all directions. Their collective assault was fierce, but Jaehwan moved with precision and deadly efficiency. With a single sweeping arc of his blade, he cut down scores of traitors, shattering masks and severing the arm of the Dark Soul Unit's captain in one devastating blow. Yet the relentless tide of enemies gave him pause. No matter how many fell, more surged forward to take their place. Jaehwan's expression remained composed, though a faint sigh escaped him as he assessed the situation. He pointed his sword toward Maihan and, with deliberate focus, unleashed a simple thrust. The power behind the attack was anything but ordinary. The sheer force of Jaehwan's stab ripped through the air, carving a destructive path toward Maihan. The minister's eyes widened in alarm as the deadly energy roared toward him. In that moment, he realized the enormity of his mistake in thinking he could challenge this man. Maihan twisted his body at the last second, narrowly evading the attack. The energy blast struck the wall behind him, leaving a massive, gaping hole in its wake. Sweat beaded on Maihan's brow as he stared at the destruction. He knew with chilling certainty that if he hadn't dodged, he'd be nothing more than a corpse right now. Jurgen Cheever and Captain Jahir stood frozen in shock, their disbelief plain on their faces. Jahir tightened his grip on his weapon as he muttered under his breath, How is he this powerful? Amidst the chaos, Jaehwan overheard the conspirators muttering urgently among themselves. Minister Maihan, one of them whispered, what do we do now? If we can't complete the undead seal, should we move to Plan B? Maihan turned toward the speaker, his expression unreadable. The conspirator continued, their voice trembling, if we release the black cloud now, it might destroy all of Gorgon, but we'll have no other choice. Jaehwan's sharp glare locked onto Maihan. His voice, low and menacing, cut through the tension like a blade. Maihan Kaldegran, he began, his tone dripping with disdain, Outer Castle Minister of Gorgon Fortress, Elder of the Golden Sky Clan, whatever titles you claim, it's clear you've chosen to tread the path of ruin. He took a step forward, the ground beneath his feet cracking with the weight of his anger. I don't know what twisted experiments you're running or how you've learned to contaminate souls, but one thing is clear to me, he growled. It's because of people like you that this world teeters on the edge of destruction. Maihan's composure faltered as he heard Jaehwan's words, but he quickly rallied. He barked a command to his men, desperation evident in his voice. Kill him. No matter the cost, stop him. Jaehwan's stance shifted, his grip on his sword tightening as he prepared to face yet another wave of attackers. His fury burned bright as he resolved to end the chaos before him, no matter how many enemies stood in his way. The conspirators launched their assault, converging on the protagonist with relentless determination, aiming to overwhelm him before he could retaliate. But Jaehwan, unperturbed by their numbers, raised his spirit sword high and cast his gaze toward the heavens. A surge of energy radiated from the blade, ascending into the sky with a brilliant glow. In an instant, the energy burst apart, fragmenting into countless luminous shards. These shards transformed into radiant projectiles that rained down from above, their trajectory precise and devastating. The sky itself seemed to echo with the fury of his power, the relentless assault wiping out the traitors in a blinding cascade of light. Meanwhile, Captain Jahir moved to assist the Prime Minister, who stood paralyzed in awe. Jurgen Cheever's eyes remained fixed on the celestial display, his expression filled with wonder. Memories of his lord's words surfaced, words about how the people of Gorgon needed an unshakable hope, something so powerful that no adversity could extinguish it. As the dazzling rain of destruction obliterated their enemies, the Prime Minister felt a glimmer of that hope, even in a man who had declared his intent to destroy the world. When the final traitor fell, Maihan, cleaved in two by Jaehwan's relentless strike, lay dying. His fragmented soul flickered weakly as he spat out his final words, his tone filled with bitter disbelief. Monster, he muttered with a twisted smirk, his life fading. Though the conspirators were defeated, Maihan's words held a grim truth, it was too late for Gorgon and the castle lord. Jaehwan didn't waste a moment. Turning to the fallen minister's remains, he unleashed another strike to ensure my Han's complete demise. Just then, Captain Jahir called out, his voice tinged with urgency. What about Chang Hyo? He still won't wake up, no matter what I do. Without hesitation, Jae-hwan strode over to the unconscious old man. Ignoring Jahir's protests, he seized Chang Hyo by the collar and hurled him against the wall with a resounding crash. Jahir's eyes widened in shock. What are you doing? Chang Hyo stirred, groaning as he regained consciousness. That feeling? That pain, he muttered, rubbing his aching back. He glared at Jae-hwan, his voice laced with irritation. You didn't have to slam me so hard. Jae-hwan feigned innocence, shrugging nonchalantly. You should have woken up when I called you. Before anyone could respond, a chilling shift filled the air. The castle lord's transformation into an undead had progressed further. His fingers twitched slightly, a harbinger of the monstrous power he was becoming. Everyone turned their attention to him, the weight of impending doom pressing heavily on their shoulders. A dire warning blared across the castle systems. Spirit contamination level, 99.9%. Transformation into dead imminent. The notification sent a wave of alarm through everyone present. The urgency was palpable as the system attempted to calculate the subject's danger level. When the calculation failed, the final verdict appeared: giant undead confirmed. This triggered Gorgon's automated alarm system, a deafening siren that reverberated throughout the fortress and into the city. Civilians panicked, flooding the streets as they tried to flee to safety. Inspector James, stationed outside with the soldiers, shouted orders to evacuate everyone immediately. The soldiers responded swiftly, herding the townsfolk away from the castle. Yet James's gaze remained fixed on the looming structure. Tremors of dread coursed through him as he observed a sinister energy emanating from the castle, its ominous aura a harbinger of catastrophe. Inside the castle, Ching Hyo, still woozy and lying on the ground, groaned in confusion. What's with all this noise? He grumbled, attempting to sit up. Dr. Hyo quickly snapped into action, realizing the gravity of the situation. He turned to Captain Jahir. Get the Prime Minister out of here, now. Jahir nodded firmly and rushed to comply. Meanwhile, Ching Hyo's eyes shifted to Jae-hwan. You stay here, he commanded. Your sword might be too sharp for delicate tasks, but it's sharp enough to save lives. I'll need your help. Jae-hwan raised an eyebrow, his irritation barely concealed. His eyes narrowed as he noticed the gleaming sword in Hyo's hand. When did you get that? He asked, his tone accusatory. Don't tell me you replaced the one I broke? Hyo shot him a sharp glare, his patience already worn thin. Enough with the chit-chat. We don't have time for this. If we're going to save the castle lord, we need to act now. Without another word, Hyo slammed the edge of his sword into the ground, a powerful gesture that caused a ripple of energy to expand outward. To Jae-hwan's surprise, the air around the castle lord shimmered and distorted, creating a protective dome of energy, a barrier isolating the lord from the chaos around them. Within the barrier, Hyo began drawing intricate runes on the ground with his sword, each stroke radiating a faint, otherworldly light. His movements were precise, deliberate, and filled with purpose. Jae-hwan observed in silence, his sharp eyes scanning the complex symbols forming beneath the castle lord. For all his annoyance with the old man, he couldn't deny that Hyo's expertise was undeniable. Ching Hyo's mind wandered to a simpler time, memories of shared camaraderie with the castle lord, Prime Minister Jurgen Cheever, and Captain Jahir. He recalled one evening when the three of them had suggested to their lord that perhaps he'd had enough to drink. The lord had laughed heartily, brushing off their concerns with his usual charisma. It's just water, he had chuckled, lifting his cup with a grin. For Hyo, those moments of shared laughter and simple joys now felt like treasures from a bygone era. But now, those memories served a purpose beyond nostalgia. As Hyo worked tirelessly to prepare the undead slash, he muttered to himself, to make this work, I need memories. Memories carry weight, power, they can halt the transformation if imbued correctly. He glanced at Jae-hwan. Remember when you tried copying my slash technique against Mino? You need memories for it to work properly, not just brute force. Jae-hwan watched silently, his brow furrowed in focus, but his thoughts were interrupted by Hyo's sudden intake of breath. The old man's hand trembled as he looked at the castle lord. Lord, he called, his voice steady but tinged with unease. Yet the figure before him didn't respond as he had hoped. Instead, what Hyo saw sent chills coursing through his spine. The castle lord's eyes glowed an eerie crimson, and a menacing presence radiated from him. Hyo froze, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. This wasn't the castle lord he knew. The world Hyo had painstakingly crafted with his sword began to crack and fragment as though something within it was too powerful to contain. No. This isn't him. Hyo exclaimed, panic rising in his voice. Jae-hwan's sharp gaze snapped to the lord, and his body tensed as he tried to assess the situation. "What's happening?" he demanded, his voice edged with urgency. Hyo's trembling reply came as a whisper. "That's not the castle lord, not anymore." The figure before them shattered the chains that bound him as if they were mere threads. Veins bulged grotesquely beneath his skin, pulsating with unnatural energy. His body seemed larger, more imposing, as an ominous red mark etched itself onto his forehead. An aura of malevolence engulfed the room, suffocating everyone present. Hyo staggered back, fear etched across his face. Despite his trembling legs, he managed to whisper, This is a monster." The creature lifted a foot and stomped against the ground, unleashing a shockwave of energy. The air crackled, and an oppressive force surged toward Jaehwan and Hyo. Jaehwan braced himself, his instincts screaming danger, while Hyo stood frozen, overwhelmed by the enormity of what stood before them. This wasn't just a transformation, this was something far worse. The creature stared down at its own hands, flexing them as if in disbelief at the form it had taken. Its crimson eyes glowed with eerie delight, scanning the room with a sense of curiosity and superiority. "So, this is the body I've taken," it murmured, its voice a deep, resonant tone that seemed to reverberate through the very air. A smirk crept across its face as it examined itself. "At last, the castle lord succumbs to the undead. A fitting vessel for my return." Its gaze shifted to Ching Hyo, who stood paralyzed, his trembling figure betraying the sheer terror gripping him. Recognition flickered in the creature's eyes, and it grinned, baring sharp teeth that gleamed menacingly. "Well, isn't this an unexpected encounter?" it mused, tilting its head. "Ching Hyo, still clinging to chaos after all this time. Tell me, have you not found what you sought in the abyss? Even after 900 years? Ching Hyo staggered back, his knees nearly buckling under the weight of the creature's oppressive aura. He whispered hoarsely, the lone king of chaos." The creature's grin widened, amusement flashing in its eyes. "Ah, so you do remember me. The lord of the undead palace, harbinger of the abyss catastrophe." It waved a hand dismissively, shattering the intricate world Ching Hyo had painstakingly constructed moments ago. The illusion crumbled like fragile glass, leaving the castle chamber bare and exposed. The sheer force of the destruction sent shockwaves through the room, making both Jaehwan and Ching Hyo reel from the pressure. Jaehwan clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he tried to make sense of the being before him. It bore the traits of an undead, yet something about it was distinctly different. Something far more ominous. "What is that thing?" he muttered, his voice filled with frustration and disbelief. The lone king of chaos turned its attention to Ching Hyo once more, its gaze piercing. "Why linger here, old man? Have you not yet abandoned this doomed world? Or is there something left for you to protect?" Its mocking tone sent chills through Hyo, who could only shake his head, unable to muster a response. The creature's smirk faded into a look of mock contemplation. "Perhaps you truly believe this world can be saved," it said, waving its hand lazily. The energy it released obliterated every trace of Ching Hyo's protective constructs, leaving him gasping in horror. "Pathetic," it added, its disdain evident. "Your efforts are as fragile as this creation of yours." Hyo's wide eyes filled with panic as the truth began to sink in. "This isn't just the castle lord, this is catastrophe's doing," he murmured, his voice shaking. "This is one of the lone king's clones, brought forth through the undead incarnation." Jaehwan's eyes narrowed at the revelation. He could feel the suffocating pressure emanating from the being before them, and his instincts screamed danger. Yet, amidst the chaos, a strange flicker of curiosity sparked in the lone king's gaze as it turned toward him. "And who is this?" it asked, its voice tinged with interest. "A human? No, something more. Fully awakened, yet still bound to a mortal's mind. Fascinating." The lone king leaned closer, its ominous presence bearing down on Jaehwan and Ching Hyo. "Tell me," it said with an unsettling calm, "what is it that you fight for, little one? Do you truly believe you can stand against the abyss?" The lone king of chaos stood still, his malevolent gaze fixed on the room, his crimson eyes glinting with amusement. Lost in thought, he was jolted by the sharp voice of the protagonist. "Did your undead slash fail?" Jaehwan called out, gripping his sword tightly, his tone edged with determination. The lord of the undead's lips curled into a sinister smile. "And what do we have here?" he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "Do you think you can kill me, boy?" He let out a low chuckle that grew into a booming, haunting laugh. "What a bold and amusing little human." Ignoring the condescension, Jaehwan tightened his grip on his blade, stepping forward with resolute confidence. Ching Hyo quickly intervened, fear evident in his trembling voice. "Stop, you fool. You don't understand what you're dealing with. You can't defeat that thing." He gestured desperately toward the lone king. "Not even Malak could face catastrophe and live. This creature may only be a clone, but its power is still beyond imagination." Jaehwan glanced back, his expression calm and unwavering. "Don't worry about me, old man," he said, his voice firm. I'm not planning to lose. His assured demeanor left Ching Hyo flabbergasted. How could someone stand so confidently in the presence of such overwhelming power? The lone king of chaos let out a hearty laugh, the sound reverberating through the room like a sinister echo. Confidence, is it? He mocked, watching Jaehwan with growing interest. Or is it just foolishness? Either way, it's been a while since I've seen someone so audacious. As the tension grew, the creature suddenly paused, his body shifting unnaturally. Something dark began to rise from deep within him, traveling up his form like living shadows, pooling at his throat. Jaehwan's eyes narrowed as he tried to make sense of what was happening, while Ching Hyo froze, his face pale with horror. The lone king reached into his mouth and, with a sickening motion, pulled forth a blade forged of pure darkness, a weapon that seemed to swallow the very light around it. Its jagged edges pulsed with void-like energy. "Do you recognize this?" the creature hissed, holding the weapon aloft. "The void blade, a relic of the abyss. One that turned half your precious expedition into mindless undead at the abyss's gates." Ching Hyo staggered back, his voice barely a whisper. "The void blade. I thought it was lost. How is it here?" The lone king sneered, his aura flaring with terrifying intensity. "Foolish awakened one," he spat, addressing Jaehwan. "You dare face me with nothing but your mortal mind. Very well, entertain me." Without warning, he lunged forward with unimaginable speed, his form blurring as he closed the distance between them in an instant. His blade descended like a storm of death, but Jaehwan moved swiftly, dodging with a calculated sidestep. Sparks flew as the void blade sliced through the ground where he had been standing, carving a fissure into the stone floor. The lone king straightened, a hint of surprise in his crimson eyes. "Interesting," he murmured. "That look in your eyes? I've seen it before." He tilted his head, scrutinizing Jaehwan with a newfound curiosity. "You're not just fighting for survival. Tell me, human, are you aiming for the abyss?" Ching Hyo's breath caught in his throat as the realization struck him like a thunderbolt. Jaehwan, with his quiet resolve and mysterious aura, intended to descend into the abyss. The very thought chilled the old man to the bone. He had always known there was something enigmatic about Jaehwan, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. Meanwhile, the lone king of chaos loomed over the battlefield, his crimson eyes burning with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. "So," he drawled, his voice echoing ominously, "there are still those who wish to reach the end of this world." He stepped closer, his towering presence casting a dark shadow over Jaehwan. Without warning, the creature's clawed hand shot forward, gripping Jaehwan's head with crushing force. Jaehwan gritted his teeth, his body straining against the overwhelming pressure. The lone king tilted his head, his tone mockingly introspective. "Weak," he muttered, as if disappointed. "Far too weak. You're nothing like that dream demon from 900 years ago." As if to punctuate his scorn, the lone king raised his cursed blade high, the edges glinting with abyssal energy. The air around it seemed to wail, a harbinger of devastation. With a roar, the blade descended toward Jaehwan, aiming to end him in one strike. But Jaehwan wasn't one to fall so easily. Gritting his teeth, he grabbed the undead king's wrist, straining against the impossible strength, his muscles trembling with exertion. In a desperate bid for freedom, he twisted his body and somersaulted backward, narrowly evading the deadly swing of the void blade. The ground where he had stood moments before exploded into shards of stone, the sheer force of the strike reverberating through the castle. Landing deftly on his feet, Jaehwan retaliated in an instant, lunging forward with precision. His blade flashed, slicing through the air and striking the lone king's arm. With a sickening crack, the arm fell, severed cleanly at the joint. Jaehwan skidded back, his heart pounding in his chest as he allowed himself a brief moment of relief. But that moment was short-lived. The lone king's laughter rang out, cold and unrelenting. "Did you think that was enough?" he sneered, his severed arm bubbling and twisting unnaturally. Before Jaehwan's astonished eyes, the arm began to regenerate, the flesh knitting itself back together in mere seconds. The lone king flexed his restored hand, his grin widening. "You'll have to do better than that." Without giving Jaehwan a chance to recover, the undead monarch surged forward again, his movements unnaturally swift. Jaehwan darted to the side, narrowly avoiding being caught by those clawed hands, but the gap between them was closing fast. Seizing the opportunity while Jaehwan was momentarily distracted, the lone king of chaos struck with ruthless precision. His void blade sliced through the air, grazing Jaehwan's arm before the young warrior managed to twist away. With a swift counter, Jaehwan launched a quick thrust of his sword, forcing the undead king to retreat momentarily. Utilizing the small opening, Jaehwan dashed to safety, narrowly evading another deadly slash from the cursed weapon. The lone king let out a low chuckle, his voice dripping with malice. "Time itself is a disease," he mused, his crimson eyes fixed on Jaehwan. Even the slightest touch of the void blade will make you feel the weight of centuries, no, millennia, aging you until you're nothing but a withered husk? Jaehwan's gaze shifted to the wound on his arm, blood trickling from where the blade had grazed him. The ominous aura surrounding the injury made his stomach twist. Was this what the Lone King meant? The thought sent a chill through him. Noticing Jaehwan's unease, the Lone King's grin widened. Yes, worry, human. Time erodes all. Even the mightiest spirits are not immune. They weaken, age, and eventually succumb to contamination, becoming nothing more than mindless undead. It's inevitable? As he spoke, one of his arms, which had been damaged in their previous clash, began to regenerate. The process was grotesque, yet seamless, as if time itself rewound to restore the limb to its former state. Jaehwan, however, wasn't one to be shaken so easily. He glanced at his injured arm again and scoffed, raising his blade defiantly. If you're talking about this wound, he said, a sharp edge to his voice, then it's nothing worth worrying about. Without hesitation, Jaehwan brought his sword down and sliced through his own arm just above the wound, severing it cleanly. Blood spattered the ground as he gritted his teeth through the pain, but his expression remained resolute. If time and contamination are your weapons, then I'll simply cut them away, he declared. The Lone King's laughter echoed through the battlefield, a mixture of amusement and admiration. Fascinating, he murmured, his gaze lingering on the now injured warrior. You may be reckless, but you are certainly not dull. Let's see how long that fire of yours lasts against the unrelenting tide of eternity. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. We'll see you in the next one.